My guest this evening is Ken Jones, who's just up from Macon, Georgia, and he's the author of the explosive book named Saved by the IRS. And yes, you heard me correctly, Saved by the IRS. With the IRS having been in the news in the recent past several months, this book is more than timely. A modern-day David versus Goliath story. You won't believe how far the IRS will go. Some of you may find this somewhat disturbing, but it's the true story of one man's fight with the IRS. Government misconduct that took this guest's business, his family, and his health. With all that being said, Ken, welcome to Business Beat Live.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Why don't we go back to basically somewhat before the story begins, to your family, the business that you've been running for years, and then kind of lead into this unfortunate situation that you had for a number of years with the IRS.
Well, I still got 2 electronic stores, and on this Ken's Stereo Junction. We opened up in '78, $30,000 loan, and it grew to a multi-million-dollar business. And in '86, when everything came down on me.
Now, when you say everything came down, what was the first thing that transpired that let you know that you were dealing with the IRS?
Well, I knew I was under regular civil audit for a year and a half, but I had no idea what they were doing behind my back. And what happened was that in October 1986, the store filled up with all kind of people with suits, and I didn't think nothing about it. And I saw a deputy sheriff walk up to me with tears in his eye. He was crying, and I asked him, "What's wrong?" He said, and he stepped back and walked a guy with IRS and 6 U.S. Marshals. And then when he said, "I'm Mr. Castile with IRS, and you owe us $948,000. I said, "Mr. Castile, where do you get those figures?" He said, "It does not matter." He really did. He said, "It does not matter." I said, "Oh, okay." And meanwhile,
well, wouldn't you think you would have some documentation or some sort of documents that we've calculated this, we've calculated that, taxes, penalties, and interest, $948,000 and some change.
He did not give me anything, no paperwork, no nothing. I had no idea where he was coming from.
Didn't that seem a little unusual to you?
Oh yeah, quite unusual. It was unlawful.
I mean, if a vendor came in and said, "You owe us some money," you know, he'd give you some sort of documentation.
Mm-hmm. And to buy some time, I was so startled. It was on a Monday morning. I pulled open the middle door, just trying to think what I was going to do. Meanwhile, the U.S. Marshals pulled their weapons on me and pointed at my head. And I said, "Whoa, wait a minute. What are you people doing?" He said, "You think I'm going to blow my brains out?" He said, "No, we'll worry about you blowing our brains out because we know you used to be a line of policemen." And I said, he said, "Can we get your pistol and get the bullets?" I said, "Sure." So we walked outside, and they was hooking up my new Corvette. And I gave them the keys, I put the bullets out and gave them to the marshals. Walked back in the store. I said, "What are you people doing to me right now?" He said, "We're going to take everything you own. We're going to take your stores, your home, your cars. We've already got $100,000 out of your bank account." And I said, "You people can come in here and do this kind of thing without no proof or anything?" He said, "Yeah."
Well, didn't they have some basis for it? Didn't they have some paperwork or whatever? Wouldn't they describe somehow that we did an audit, for example, and based on our audit, this is what you owe in penalty, interest, and taxes?
No, he said nothing. I mean, all he said, "We were taking everything you got." And
what was your feeling at that point? We're taking everything you've got.
Well, my feeling was that I'll admit head on that I did not pay all my taxes, to make it real clear. I paid most of the taxes, but not all my taxes, and there's a reason for it. But anyway, they showed me no paperwork, no anything, and the marshals forced me out of my business. And
they physically took you out then?
Beg your pardon?
They physically took you out of the business?
Yeah, took me out of the business, and like that, he said, "Don't ever come back." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "What about how I'm going to get home?" He said, "We don't care." I said, "Oh." So I had a 12-year-old cargo van. I drove home. And that's where it started, right there. And it's a real tragedy. Just like Gestapo.
Well, of course, you've also, if we just kind of fast forward a bit, you've had how many bypass surgeries? 14?
I've had 2 major heart attacks, 14 bypasses.
And all as a result of?
The stress.
The stress that?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Destroyed my health.
Obviously, you probably weren't in a position where you could file a lawsuit, though, were you? Or could you? The federal government involved?
Well, the way the government works is that they have absolute power. And why I'm saying that, they have power over the attorney as well as their side. They got both sides of the aisle covered. So if your attorney is actually doing a good job, they got a thing called, I'm sure you're aware of, Circular 230. And what that means is that they can stop you from ever practicing law in any federal court. That's what that means. And that's what they threatened my attorney with.
So how did your attorney take this? What was his response?
He got very upset. What happened is that the civil audit was going on, and to be honest with you, I didn't know what was going on completely. She called me from my attorney's office. She said, "My name's Bonnie Waldrop, and I'm at your attorney's office." I said, "Oh, okay." So she started drilling me all these questions, so I answered all of them truthfully for about 30 minutes. So I hung up the phone. I got to thinking about it. I said, why is my lawyer doing all this? Why am I talking to her? So I called Jay Hawkins up, which was my local tax attorney. I said, "Jay, why do I have to talk to this woman?" He said, "What are you talking about?" I wasn't even in the room. I was not even in the room. I said, "Well, I think I might have incriminated myself because I had no idea."
Because normally, wouldn't you expect to, excuse me, talk with your attorney present as opposed to?
Oh, sure. Well, you assume that. She was in the office. She was in a conference room, and he was in his office. But see, she didn't tell me that. She said, "I'm in your attorney's office." You assume that your attorney's sitting right there, okay? And she tricked me.
So she was deceitful then?
Deceitful and trickery, and that's a big part of the case right there. And that's a big part.
And when you say it's a big part of the case, how did that affect the goings on? I mean, this went on for a number of years, this problem.
It went on for 7 years, and it was, look, they said the tax judges ultimately said it was reprehensible what they did to me. They could not believe they did that to anybody. And I was fortunate enough to be blessed with a power of prayer, which helped me a great deal. So the whole book is about power of God in my life against the forces of evil, the IRS. That's what I call them, and they really are.
So basically this power of the faith is basically the strength that you kind of latched onto, if you will, to get you through this absolute nightmare.
Absolutely.
How did you deal with it as you went along? I mean, again, for 7 years. I mean, some people might say you're lucky to be sitting here today.
Well, what happened is that I took everything in October. The judge forced him to give my business back. And of course, he made common sense. He said, "How's Mr. Jones going to pay his taxes if he don't have a business?" And they couldn't answer that question because it was wrong. And it was illegal from day one. I'll get into that later on. But what happened is that 6 months later, my wife divorced me of 23 years. And then a year later, I went to prison. So all this happened in 18 months. So you're talking about stress, that was a lot of stress.
Why did your wife divorce you? Well, you would think in a lot of instances, you think the wife would stand by you and try to support you in such hard times, if you will.
What happened over a period of years that we kind of grew apart. And this was like just the thing that actually kicked it over the edge. And she wanted to get away. She was afraid. I always told Grace that I would protect her, and they only wanted me, but she didn't believe it. And she left me and divorced me, and that really hurt me real bad. I had a hard time dealing with that for a while. I had to pray awful lot about that, but I didn't have any problem losing material things. I know you can always get them back, but losing people in your life is very serious.
Yeah, you certainly would, I suspect, would have thought that she would have supported you as opposed to having left you.
Well, she left me.
At least most people would think.
Well, she said she was doing me a favor, and I asked her, "How do you figure that?" He said, "Well,
in her mind, she thought she was doing you a favor.
Yeah, she
Perhaps
said
not
that.
in yours, obviously.
No, I was very upset. It bothered me a lot. Yes, very upset. I drank beer all the time and just went nuts. I couldn't handle it.
So what transpired after that point in time? Obviously, because we were going along over the 7 years.
Well, they forced me to pay 5% of all my retail sales until they got settled, even though nobody ever knew what the real sum was. So meanwhile, I got this attorney called David Altry in Atlanta. He does trial cases and everything. And the next thing we know, we went to I went to prison for a year and a half. I got a 3-year sentence. My judge reduced it by 6 months, so I got out in 18 months. I went to Maxwell, same where Chuck Colson went, Charles Colson, and Mitchell went, John Mitchell.
How did that stress affect you when you were in prison? I mean, you were under enough stress as it was before you got to that point. You got in more stress.
It was a minimum security, no gates and anything like that. But what's hard is that they take away your self-esteem, your value, what you think of yourself. You're a nobody. You don't have a name. You're wearing a green outfit. They talk to you like dirt. It was real hard the first 3 months because I always been a man of my own, and I could always take care of everything on myself. And all of a sudden, I had no power to do anything for myself, and I had to listen to these people and do what they told me to do.
One can assume that perhaps you took a Bible with you to prison?
Oh yeah, I took a Bible and I read it twice during the whole time I was in there. I had plenty of time.
And that helped you sustain your faith that somehow or another, with the help of God up above, so to speak, you were going to get through this this terrible problem.
Yeah, that's true. I had that issue of that I'm actually living proof there's a living God, and I'll tell you about that when time's right. But anyway, the prison was 18 months. I got to meet some doctors and judges and sheriffs of Georgia. There was a lot of people in there. I was surprised, and doctors wouldn't pay taxes for some reason. I said, "You're 72 years old."
Was that a prison basically where they were putting people that hadn't paid their past taxes?
Well, yeah, that's one thing, and also minor drug problems. Anytime you had 5 years or less, they send you to a minimum security. Now, if you got more than that, they send you a real lockdown prison. And
So I imagine you must have shared an awful lot of stories then.
yeah, well, everybody said they wasn't guilty. It was cracking me up. I always said I was. I figured I had to admit my sin to get rid of it. So I always said I was guilty, and a guy would always say, "You're the only one in this whole place who said they was guilty."
Well, how could they say they're not guilty when they were sentenced to a prison term?
It's just the
I mean,
nature. It's the nature of the
You can't
beast.
imagine that every court basically erred in making a decision that you're guilty as opposed to not guilty.
Well, I'll just tell you like it is. Nobody said they were guilty. I mean, there were 900 people there, and I got to know a few of them pretty close. A banker was in there from Florida that I actually personally knew, and he loaned himself $1 million.
He did what?
He loaned himself $1 million and put it in the stock market, paid it back with interest. Of course, he got 5 years for that. Cracked me up. But I met a lot of real nice people. There were some good people in there as well. I kind of stayed to myself with the doctors, the lawyers and bankers and this sort of thing.
So what transpired after you got out of prison?
Well, I got out the prison. I got out early, and I never told anybody. And when I got home, I saw my son Michael, and he said, "Daddy, you didn't break out, did you?" I said, "No, I didn't break out." I said, and
Did that thought ever occur to you?
Well, no. You get 5 more years for that. So I got
Because
home.
again, believing in the faith that you had in God, so to speak, obviously you wouldn't have thought of something along those lines.
No.
Maybe I can break out and be free.
There were several guys walked out now while I was there. It was real funny. But anyway,
Only to be put back for a longer sentence.
well, they're going to catch you eventually. But anyway, he had he started crying, and we got together, and next day I saw him, went to the halfway house for 3 months. That's where they put you as transition from going there to real life, where you can adjust to getting out. And the first year I was a zombie, to be honest with you. I was no good to nobody. They had destroyed my ego and self-esteem so bad that I didn't even know who the boss was. It wasn't me for the time.
So as your life continued basically after you got out,
Well,
what has transpired in the
after a year, my passion came back, and I went and bought my new Mercedes convertible. I was paying my taxes. The taxes had not been open, been closed, and they told me I had to sell my car. I said, "No, I'm not selling my car."
Why did you have to sell your car? They still claimed an unpaid liability?
Well, they didn't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. We'd already went to civil court, and my attorney, David...
Seems awfully strange. You got to sell your car. Well, why? But we don't have an amount, and we don't have a reason as to why you owe an amount.
They told me that, and I said, "No, I'm not going to do that. Y'all can go ahead and kill me." And they backed off.
You dared the feds?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I was at the point I took all the hell I could take from them people. It was 5.5 years at that time. My attorney exposed a tremendous amount of corruption. Tremendous. And I won a huge case that stopped him from doing a certain thing.
Let me ask you this question, Ken, on sort of a, well, I won't say on a personal level, but some people think that, or some thought that perhaps not all of the story is in the book. Is there more to this story than
Yes.
what is in the book?
Yes.
And if so, why? Why is it not in the book?
Well, my sister didn't want to be involved. She said, "I don't want my name in the book." What happened is that once my sister went to see the judge. He reduced my sentence by 6 months. As a result of that, the IRS found out about it. They went after my own sister. She had a daycare center in Douglasville, and had it was so bad that they froze her account with $5,000. You need to call this number. So she called the number and said, "Why are y'all freezing my checking account?" He said, "Is J.K. Jones your brother?" And she said, "Yes." "Well, give us $5,000, or you can find us with an attorney." He said, I got a daycare center. I'm a single parent. I can't do that." So they took $5,000.
So basically, they were punishing her
For me.
for what she did.
Exactly right.
And again, another instance of
Abuse of power.
abuse of power.
Mm-hmm.
Did she try to pursue anything in that regard, or just simply paid the $5,000, let it go?
Well, no, she didn't have the money. You know, you hire a tax attorney, you go any direction. And no, she didn't. She let him have the $5,000 and walked away from it. This was in '91.
Now, one of the things that you did too, which of course is, which I guess got you into some trouble as well, is you actually back in, I guess it was 1980, you started to skim money from your daycare center and your stereo store business.
Yeah.
Why would you do such a thing when you already had mounting problems with the IRS, and this would only perhaps serve to create further problems, if you will, tax-wise?
Well, back in those days, it wasn't out of greed. People were getting free food, free money, and driving brand new Cadillacs. And I was working 12 to 14 hours a day. My wife was working 12 hours a day in the daycare center. And that's when I said, this is not right for them to get free money by lying about that situation. And that's when I started skimming money out of the business.
But that's the rationale that you used?
That's the it was wrong, but yes, you're right.
Did you ever give any thought to one of the days the roof's going to collapse and
no,
we
because
have a problem here for skimming money, unreported income, if you will?
Oh yeah, it is. It's money I've earned, but I just didn't pay taxes on it. But I did pay taxes, but I didn't pay all my taxes though.
So where'd that lead you?
Well, it led to this jeopardy assessment. I found out that they had been doing an undercover criminal investigation on me for 4 years prior to them seizing everything I own, which is illegal. The civil and the criminal people are supposed to be separate altogether. And what they did was that the criminal guy was in the background doing all the background stuff, while the civil asking me questions. He was telling her what questions they asked me to put me in jail.
Now, what did your attorney tell you as you were going along with all of this?
Well, my attorney, Jay Hawkins, was not a trial attorney, but once I got David Autry on board, and I think he came on board in '87 in Atlanta. Once he came on the board, that he saw how much they did. He was an IRS agent himself, so he knows how corrupt they are. So he put me on board without no retainer because I didn't have any money. They took everything I had. I had some cash left over. But after that, you know, he took over, and finally in 1989, while I was still in prison, they put handcuffs and shackles on me and a minimum security account. And I looked at the driver, I said, "Why have I got shackles and arms? I'm in a minimum security prison." The IRS told me to. I said, "The IRS said to do that?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay." That intimidation meant not much to me because growing up as a boy, I was abused by my father, and physically and mentally and emotionally. And as a result of that, I grew strong, very strong person.
Again, believing in your faith, believing in your faith in God, and that sort of thing, that everything would ultimately turn out okay.
Well, there's great power in prayer. A lot of people don't understand that, but it is a great power in prayer. Because as you read, when I was in prison, I got by stuff. It was just, it had to be God. I mean, it had to be God, you know.
There was nothing else you could attribute it to that?
No,
no. Well, because many people believe that and obviously it must be true. That
well, it's true.
The power of the Almighty, the power of God to
it is true.
Intercede and help you get through a trying time.
It reminds me of 1977. I was a manager of an insurance company in Macon before I started Ken's in '78. And my daddy called me in the hospital. I went to the hospital and he said, "Kenneth, I died and went to heaven and I had to come back. God made me come back to tell you something that's very important." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Kenneth, you're going to lose everything you've worked for all your life." I said, "Do what now?" "And grace is going to leave you." And he said, "Will almost kill you." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I don't know what it is, Kenneth, but I had to come back to warn you. I can't wait to go back to heaven because I saw the bright lights, the tunnel, everything." And he said, "I felt it was the most enormous feeling I've ever had in my life." And he repeated it again, and I didn't have a clue what he was talking about, of course. So here I was in 1989. I was in prison laying in bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. And all of a sudden, 12 years later, it hit me what Daddy said. So that show there is a higher power, but for real.
You mentioned that you wanted to talk about the speedy trial.
Well, the speedy trial is they took everything I owned, and 3.5 years later, I finally went to court about my civil case to prove what my actual liability was. Now, you got to keep in mind, they took everything I had with no notice, no hearing, and no court. I didn't have a clue where they were coming from. It's called jeopardy assessment. What that means, you're taking your assets out of the country and they can't get their money. Well, how do you move to electronic stores in your home? I mean, it's somewhere.
Good-sized rigs.
I think you won't find common sense in IRS rules. There's no common sense. They don't make any common sense because they don't have to. They're
Well, let me
unstoppable.
pose this question at this point in time, Ken, in our interview here this evening. Why did the IRS pick on you?
You know, because another guy did some serious money. I didn't do the serious money, but he had like $4 million. And he left the country. Him and his wife left the country for about 2 years, eventually got caught. And they jumped on me and they kept mentioning his name over and over and over. And I said, I don't even know the guy.
So in other words, Ben Smith, just to
Right.
pick a fictitious name, but Ben Smith did this, did that, did something else. So because he did this and did that, they basically slamming you to make sure that you don't do this, that, and whatever.
Well, they
In
didn't.
essence, wasn't that about what it seems like it amounted to?
Well, that's exactly what it's about because they kept calling me his name over and over. I said, he did this, he did that. I said, I don't know the guy. What are you talking about?
Well, what bearing would that have on you?
There again, there's no common sense when it comes to the IRS. None whatsoever. You will not find
Yeah,
it
but you
in
talk
there.
about, Ken, about no common sense. I mean, I've had many dealings with the IRS over the years, been in the accounting field, tax field for years. I've never heard of a story like this. Basically, I mean, you talk about stepping over the bounds. Is it possible perhaps that there was a conspiracy here? That
Oh,
one
yeah.
or more of the agents had it in for you in some
Yeah,
respect?
I think the criminal investigator, Gary Schwab, was really, really an evil person. He actually went to a real drug dealer. And I found out 16 years after the court and said, I'll make your problems go away if you'll tell me Ken Jones is in the drug business. Well, that flabbergasted me. I mean, I was just stunned they did that. If he would say that, it would have sold my stores and everything I had. They came to my house 7 months after they seized everything by himself, which is illegal, okay? And he
Should he
asked,
have come with more than one agent? Or he should have...
Well,
you
they said, no, no.
What should have happened?
well, I should have had my attorney, there. I'm not supposed to talk to them without attorney. This is real clear. Is the law. But he knew nobody would be at the house but me because I just went through a devastating divorce. So he asked me, he says, Ken, did your son pay you any rent? I said, no. While he was here, I said, no. He got mad and walked away. I found out later, if you have any other source of income, even $20 a week, they'll sell everything you got. Did you know that?
No, I guess it's true.
I know it's true.
Yeah.
But I found that out in 1989 when David Alter, my attorney, told me, he said, glad you said no because they would have sold your business. That's another, I said, $20 a week's another source? I said, yeah, well, they look at it. That's how corrupt they are.
So once again, though, why would they have been doing all of this to you over this long period of time?
Well, my attorney, David Alter, said he has never, ever seen in Atlanta.
Did he have some thoughts, perhaps, on
Well,
why?
he's never seen the vendetta and the viciousness of these people, the IRS, in any trial he's ever done. He said, I've never seen anything like this. And he said, I don't know. I said, I don't know what I did. I don't know why they hated my guts so much, but they did a lot of illegal things, which most of them got exposed except for the extortion about a drug dealer. And of course, that rumor went all over Macon, thought I was in something illegal, which I never have been. I've always just been a hard worker. I've always thought drugs were weak people personally.
Now, why don't we kind of move along towards perhaps the end of this this long ongoing scenario that you had, and how did this finally end, and what was the outcome?
Well, the good news is that after about 2 years, no decision came up. So the IRS wanted to call me from Macon. So the lady said, can I meet you, Mr. Jones? I said, sure. All of a sudden, I was Mr. Jones. And sat
Probably
down.
the first time you'll call Mr. Jones.
Yeah, everybody else called me Ken. Anyway, we sat down and she said, basically what we're going to do is let's cut you loose and cut all the things, do everything. I said, wait a minute, I want $250,000 in attorney fees. I can't do that. She got real mad and walked away. Well, they put her up to it because they knew they were losing, okay? So finally the case came down and And the tax judge in Washington said it cost him $100,000 to try my case in Atlanta. I had to sleep on the floor in a Douglas County jail. They made me do that with the murderer and another person. And they did everything to hurt me. But there again, they had no idea my background. See, I grew up very, very poor. And also, my daddy had abused me. So the more they tried to hurt me, the stronger I got. And they never
And this
understood
faith
that.
in God that
Faith in God
kept prevailing time
yes.
after time after time.
Yeah, faith in God. And I always pray in the name of Jesus. And that is a really strong words. A lot of people, those 6 words just mean so much. It does to me anyway.
Those 6 words being?
In the name of Jesus. Pray in the name of Jesus.
Pray in the name of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things we ought to talk about too is that because of all of this and what they did to you, there was I'm trying to think of the adjective or the words that I want to use here. There was a major change. They dropped the program, I believe is what they did.
What happened?
The IRS dropped a particular
Well,
program.
what happened, the federal judges saw how much misbehavior was in his misconduct. They said reprehensible and all these long words. And then they actually broke, in my opinion, 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment. But the judge wouldn't go over that limit because they said they were dead wrong, which it really was, because the 2 other federal tax judges said I was a sleazeball. Well, they didn't know me from Adam. All I know is what
The judges called you a sleazeball?
No, the judge said the 2 other judges did. And that's why he backed off on that part of the program. And what happened, see, is that Schwab, the criminal investigator, I have no idea what he wrote about me to them. I don't have a clue what he said. Anything about me. So they believe what this guy is telling them, see. So I'm not a sleazeball. I'm not anything else. I'm very respected in the community. I know the governor, the mayor, sheriff, everybody. And I've gained back the respect, and everybody looks up to me.
I know you've mentioned in the book many times these various people that did stand by you as you went through this long ordeal.
Yeah, a lot of people walked away from me, and the two people that meant the most to me at that time was my 2 sons, Kenny and Michael. And I dedicated the book to Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, and my 2 sons, Kenny and Michael Jones, because, Kenny said, I'll never forget Kenny telling me, Daddy, only God can help us now, when he was like 21 years old. And I always told Kenny that if the IRS does not kill me, I will win. So help me God. And I said that many times to him. And finally, at the very end of the program, in '92, when I found out that I actually went in the case, I stopped the control referral program. Now, what that meant was that this is a nationwide deal where criminal people will do an investigation behind a civil audit and don't tell the people what's going on, which is what they did to me, which is totally against the law. It's against their law, okay?
So they should have told you.
Oh,
But
yeah.
they were doing the criminal behind the civil.
They went to my daycare center with a IRS woman. I mean, in '82, 4 years prior to all this.
Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light